Talk, though, first of all, about the roads of this country, because, quite frankly, I think the government here and the Department of Transport have gone stark, staring, bonkers mad. Nick Freeman is here. Nick, a very good morning to you.
Morning, mate.
So, we sort of knew this was coming, but I didn't really know until yesterday that the emanation of it, if you like, from the Department of Transport has been driven by this kind of anti-car mentality where they want everybody walking and cycling everywhere, which, as I've said, is all very well if you live in a relatively urban setting. But my children, for example, live in quite, not particularly rural part of Sussex, but, you know, a part of Sussex which is quite rural. There are no public transport options really to speak of after 5 o'clock at night.
No, I think it's well intentioned, but I think it's ill conceived.
Yeah.
That they haven't actually thought through carefully. That the whole point of this is to increase safety, and we're all in favour of that, to try and make our roads safer for everybody, for all users. But safety doesn't actually equal priority, and what they're doing is they're prioritising the most vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians, cyclists, etc., in reverse order. So, for example, we're going to have a situation now where pedestrians at junctions can step off the road. They have priority, and I fear that it's going to be carnage. I fear that actually it's going to have the reverse effect, and our roads are going to be much more angry and much more dangerous, particularly for the most vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Because we always have situations now, don't we, where pedestrians and cyclists have this sort of sense of entitlement. They're now going to have the force of the highway code behind it, which will only increase that sense of entitlement, and it will make our roads much dangerous. It seems to just lack common sense, as many things do in this day and age. So I do fear for it. I think it's important to bear in mind that most of these provisions are advisory. They're not mandatory. So when it says you should do this, you should do that, that they're advising you to do it. But of course, if you don't do it and there is an accident, you will be prosecuted and it will be evidence collated against you. And obviously it's evidence that carries significant weight. So you need to comply with it.
Yes.
But the provisions, you know, you're driving along and you come to a junction, you're about to turn left, there's a pedestrian there, you slam your brakes on because the pedestrian's going to step out in front of you. You know, wouldn't it be more sensible to say to those who are most vulnerable, you actually have to share this responsibility as well. And actually, pedestrians should cross the roads at certain designated places to try and make them safer, rather than just saying step out at junctions because you're the boss, it's your right of way. To me, it defies common sense and logic.
So are you saying that this potentially could be a situation, for example, so you're coming up to, you're on a dual carriageway, you're coming up to a roundabout, as you come to the stop at the roundabout, somebody could just walk out and cross the road there?
Yeah, they've specified roundabouts for cycling, not necessarily for pedestrians. They refer to junctions.
Right.
So I'm not sure we're going to have pedestrians stepping out at roundabouts, but certainly at all the junctions, they have priority, and you have to stop. Now, that is advisory. You know, of course, if there is a pedestrian on a zebra crossing, a pelican crossing, you must. That's mandatory. Obviously, they have right of way. You stop, you don't go.
Right.
But if they're waiting at the side, as is sensible, then you should let them pass. You should let them have priority. So, you know, the thought behind it is let's try and make the roads safer. But by removing responsibility for the most vulnerable, it's going to have the opposite effect. In the same way that smart motorways have done. You know, one good thing that comes out of this highway code is smart motorways. You know, the small amount of mileage that's left, I think it's about 63 projects left or 63 miles left, that's going to be frozen until proper technology is introduced. So they're going to do a survey for 5 years. But that's about the only good thing that I think comes out of this. And I say that not because I'm anti-road safety. I want to improve road safety, but I just don't understand how this is going to work.
No, I mean,
the other thing that's very alarming is no one knows about it.
Well,
you know, it's coming in on Saturday the 29th. The polls that have been done suggest the vast majority, well, a significant number of motorists don't even know there's going to be a change. And of those, some are saying, we're not even going to look, we don't care, which isn't healthy. The motorist obviously needs to be educated, and we need to be aware of how we properly and safely share road space.
Of course.
So,
And I think, for me, there are several issues. One which you've just raised, which is that it's advisory rather than mandatory, unless and until there's an incident, which will make it very confusing for people who are already pretty wound up on the roads because of all the carnage that's been created by the way that roads have now been redesigned in order to allow for cycle lanes and all the rest of it. And my question I put out on Twitter yesterday was that if cyclists are now being told they don't have to use cycle lanes, they're quite welcome to use the road even if there's a cycle lane next to them, what was the point of butchering the road system to put all those cycle lanes in at a considerable cost to the taxpayer?
Well, but a very valid point. But they never had to use them in any case. It was always, my complaint, and I think you agreed with me, they're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on cycle lanes. It was never a mandatory requirement that they use them. So what is the point? Either have them and say they're there for a reason, you must use them, or let's not bother at all. So I don't think they're saying anything new. The law hasn't changed in that respect. But what is interesting now is cyclists are advised to adopt what's called the primary position when it's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So in other words, they're advised to sit in the middle of the road. And that, of course, is going to infuriate motorists. That's going to increase frustration, and I think it's going to lead to many incidents, because motorists are not going to want to sit behind a cyclist who might be going 10, 15 miles an hour and being held up when the speed limit's 20 miles an hour. Right. The code actually says move over when it's safe to do so. But you can see how this is going to unfold.
Oh, of course.
And it's not going to unfold well.
No, you're exactly right. And let me ask you one other situation, which I don't know whether you can answer. If you are, for example, on a roundabout in a car and you're driving and the next sort of out, if you like, a cyclist is coming from there, are you supposed to stop on the roundabout to let him out then?
Absolutely. You've got to let him have safe passage.
So you stop on a roundabout, which up until now would be considered to be one, dangerous, and two, probably an offence.
Yeah, your priority is to ensure his safety as a motorist, and that's what you've got to do. So he can keep to the near side as he's going round, but as he approaches you, you've got to try and afford him safe passage insofar as is reasonable. You're using your common sense, your experience of driving. But what they're saying is now, if you hit a cyclist on a roundabout, even if he is coming, it's going to be your fault. The starting point is now in law. It's not the reverse burden. Well, it is actually your fault. You prove otherwise. And with the highway code now enshrined as it's going to be from Saturday, it's going to be a very heavy burden for you to shift.
Yes.
So your preoccupation is to make sure if the cyclists on that roundabout, or even pedestrians, make sure they have safe passage. And if we all do that, then I suppose there are going to be no accidents. But it's going to be tricky, isn't it?
Well, there's going to be an awful lot of people stopping where you're not expecting them to stop. For example, there's already parts of London where you're not allowed to turn left, for example, across the cycle lane. It's not just that you're supposed to stop. It's that there's actually no left turn. So if you happen to be unfortunate enough to live down that road, you have to go on somewhere else, turn right and come all the way back and around. Similarly, they've put a new thing in the highway code, I understand it, that you're not allowed to turn left without allowing any cyclist on the inside of you to go past.
Yeah, so you're going, if you wanted to turn left to the junction, say 50 yards ahead, and there's a cyclist 20, 30 yards behind you, you slow down and allow him to pass. You don't turn in front of him. You have to let him undertake you, wait till he's clear, then you go. And can you imagine the situation, Mike, if there's a pedestrian on there as well? The cyclist then has to stop for the pedestrian who has priority over the cyclist.
And if you're in a single lane road, then you're going to cause another traffic jam behind you as you wait for the cyclist or two or three or four cyclists to come past.
I think what the government needs to do is let everyone use common sense. And that tends to work because most motorists, most people have common sense. And what they're trying to do is controllers take that away. And by putting these rules in place, it is going to have the reverse effect as it has with smart motor codes. It just doesn't make sense. And one wonders who's advising the government to do this. Well, who are the people who are saying, "Look, this is a good idea"?
I can help you with that, Nick. I can help you with that. It's Chris Boardman, who's been appointed to be the sort of government's national cycling czar, who, very unsadly for him, and I can understand why he feels the way he does, had a terrible thing happen. His mother, I think, was run over by a driver and killed, and so naturally he's got an affinity with sort of making it much safer for people to walk and to cycle at all times, and I get that. But nevertheless, the government's job is to take all of that into account and not make it worse.
Yeah, look, it was a tragic accident, and I understand that, but there needs to be a balanced, sensible approach. And, obviously he's emotionally involved. He's got huge experience with cycling. One respects what he says, but you need the balance from other people who are motorists, who are lawyers, etc., who can say, look, actually, let's talk about it together and let's come up with a plan that works for everybody and not for the tiny minority.
Yes.
That's what we've got here.
Final question for you, Nick. From Mike, this has come in on Twitter. Can you please ask Nick if the cyclist is at fault during a collision if the cyclist has no lights on at night?
Well, that will be an aggravating feature for the cyclist. The cyclist is in breach of the highway code if he doesn't have lights at night time. If a car hits him, on the face of it, it will be the cyclist's fault because, we have to look at the situation as it is. Was he wearing high-vis jacket? Did he have any lights? Did he have reflectors on his bike? What sort of condition? On the face of it, if he's got no lights and it's an unlit road, it's probably going to be his fault, not the motorist. No motorist deliberately tries to mow down a cyclist. Cyclists must be visible. They have a duty to ensure. The highway code insists they should wear helmets, high-vis, etc. They're advised to do it. They need to play their part, I saw a picture of Chris Boardman the other day cycling. He wasn't wearing a helmet, and, it wasn't wearing a high-vis jacket. It doesn't send out the right message, I'm afraid.
No, absolutely right. Well, Nick, I'm sure we'll be talking about this some more as it comes into effect. But thank you very much indeed, Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer there. I mean, this is absolute and utter madness, isn't it? I mean, I'm not going to mince my words here. This is not to do with cyclists versus car drivers. This is not to do with pedestrians versus cyclists. This is to do with road safety for everybody. And what these measures suggest to me is that there will be a lot more accidents, a lot more injuries, a lot more deaths on the road, and that is not really a very good idea, is it? This is Talk Radio.